Daggers are one of the most misleading weapons in Baldur's Gate 3, with many tooltips that aren't fully accurate to what the weapon does. So in this video, I'll be ranking all 15 daggers on a tier list from best to worst, including weapons like this here, which is Sabiel's dagger from Divinity Original Sin 2. This weapon is included if you get the deluxe edition. I won't be included on this list because it just is a regular 1d4 of damage, but we even got weapons here that don't actually have the dagger tag like Dolor Amarus, meaning you can't blade sing with them, and things like the ritual dagger, which actually straight up just lies in how it works. So the first weapon we'll be focusing on is called the Worgfang or Goblinbane Dagger. There's two versions of this weapon. Now, this is one that you get very early on in the Warg Pits of the Shattered Sanctum. This will give goblins disadvantage on attack rolls against the wielder. Honestly, really good for where it's at because you're going to be facing off against a lot of goblins. This is an item that's mostly best used for the defensive purposes, and since it's a light weapon, you can oftentimes dual wield this. So for any of your characters that are focusing on using maybe short swords, you can throw this on in the offhand to get disadvantage on attack rolls against you. Honestly, pretty good for where it's at. You're never going to use it past Act 1, but for that, I'd have to say it's a solid B tier just for the defensive purposes that it brings. And next up we have the Sussur Dagger, which is an interesting one because with this weapon, it's going to silence enemies when you attack them. This can be great, but if you're using thunder damage, it makes them immune to thunder damage, so that's something to keep in mind. Another thing, it doesn't have a proper source file, so if you go to like pick it up, you can see here, I can't actually pick it up. It's weird, so yeah, be mindful if you're using this. You can't actually throw it. It doesn't silence on throw, so you're likely not going to do that. If you're on PC, you can press Alt to be able to pick it up, but if you're on console, you're kind of in a rough spot there, so the Sussur Dagger is a weird one, but I like it personally because it's got the lowest cost to use. There's other versions of the Sussur weapons which require martial weapon training, which this is just a dagger as a simple weapon. It has a slight edge in that front. But honestly, pretty good at shutting down spellcasters, and for that reason, if you can put it on your rogue, you can put it on your fighter, and they're going to go shred with this weapon. So I'd have to say this one is a solid like A tier pick. I wouldn't put it up into the S tier. If you could throw it and have the silence be applied, then there's this S tier. That requires mods for that to work, and you can get this pretty early on in the game, so it's actually quite a valuable weapon. And next up, we got the Ritual Dagger here. Now, this is an interesting one because not only is there another Ritual Dagger later on in the game, but this one actually doesn't tell you, it doesn't do what it says it does properly here. So with the Pain Maiden's Blessing, so after a successful attack with this dagger, you get a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws until the end of their next turn. This is not true. It's actually at the start of your turn, so you don't actually get those benefits on the attack rolls. So if you're a rogue fighting with this weapon, you'll get your advantage on the attack roll, but that's about it. You're not going to get it into the next turn unless you got an extra attack. So this unfortunately does not stack with other sources of Bless either. It's basically just giving yourself Bless on attack that expires the next time you get into a round of combat. So not super amazing, but you can also use the Blood Sacrifice here. So this will make it so that you take 1d4 of slashing damage and then get Blessed basically for one turn. Where this becomes a little bit silly is if you got rings that like apply debuffs or any type of damage to your character, you're actually going to affect yourself with them. So if you get out into the sun and use this on yourself, you can end up applying that additional radiant damage on yourself just for the bless for one turn. I honestly don't think it's super worth it. If it actually applied the bless for 2 whole turns, this would make it a lot better, but the fact that this bless basically just runs out at the end of your next turn makes it impossible to use for rogues because they're not going to get that bonus to their attack rolls and saving throws. It'll be good on the defensive turn, but yeah, this is a little bit of a misleading weapon, so for that, I'd say it's a C tier. I mean, it is available very early on. You get this in the Shattered Sanctum from Abdurak, so yeah, it's very early on that you get it. I might even just say it's a B tier, kind of similar to the Goblinbane Dagger or Worgfang. It's useful until you get it replaced. And the next weapon you can actually get right behind us here, so that's kind of cool. But this is Dolor Amarus. This is another weird weapon that doesn't properly have a weapon tag on it. So while it says dagger where my head's blocking it, it doesn't actually function as a dagger, which sucks because this would be a perfect weapon for blade singing. So I'm not sure if there's a recent update that removed this tag from it, but it makes it so that this doesn't count as a dagger properly. However, outside of that one issue, it's a very good weapon because when you get a critical hit, it adds an additional 7 damage. Why this is so crazy is because it's 7 piercing damage, and this weapon does piercing as well. So if you got things like the Ballast Armor or Orin's Dagger, which you can apply a vulnerability, that's actually 14 damage. I also do want to mention that it says when you land a critical hit with a weapon or an unarmed attack, it deals that 7 damage. It doesn't work on unarmed attacks, oddly enough, nor does it work on throwing attacks, which are coded towards being like unarmed in this game sometimes. So yeah, this is a weird one. It's still really good, and you can get 2 of these, so that's 7 damage. which can be doubled to 14, which you can have 2 of, becomes 28 extra damage. It kind of becomes a little bit silly. Now there's also a vicious battle axe and a vicious bow, which has the same effects here, which adds 7 additional damage points. So if you get all 3, that's 21 doubled to 42. It becomes pretty crazy on crits. You can also use the Crater Flesh Gloves, which adds a 1d6 of force damage, which turns into a 2d6 actually. So yeah, you can actually have a pretty crazy crit fishing build going on here with Dolor Amarus. The only thing is, this is a very late game item. Otherwise, it'd be one of the best in the game. But still, I think for it's a light weapon and it's got the ability to add a bunch of extra damage. I want to put the top of the A tier. It could be a potential. If it worked with Blade Song, it would have been one of the better choices there. Another reason that it's a good weapon is Shadow Blade is a very powerful weapon, and this can power it up to add additional damage on top of that. Next, we got another weapon that's bugged. This is the Hunter's Dagger, which you can buy from Aurora very early on in the game. Now, this will apply Ruptured on your attacks. Now, the thing is, it says it must do a difficulty challenge 13 Constitution saving throw or become Ruptured. This is not the case. It'll actually apply this every single time that you attack this weapon. So, yeah, Ruptured, however, is not that amazing of a status. It makes the target take a 1d4 piercing damage when they move 3 meters, and then it removes 1 stack of it. So you're only going to get at max like a 3d4 of extra damage, which, don't get me wrong, is kind of nice, but it's not going to always be that. Another thing is when the enemies are ruptured, if I find their AI doesn't always make them walk, they end up using Misty Step and Teleportation, which doesn't trigger that. So it's nice because it's actually applied every single time. Another funny thing is you can actually get this multiple times. So this is one of the few weapons in the game that's unique that you can get a few times. On top of all of that, it doesn't actually stack up more Ruptured. It'll apply 3 turns of Ruptured on the enemy. If you attack them again, it doesn't add it up to 6. It only does 3 stacks max. So there are some pros and cons. I think it's an okay weapon overall, and the fact you can get it pretty early on, it puts it among the other great Act 1 daggers. So I'm going to throw that just into the B tier there. Honestly, daggers are not too bad because they're mostly got a bit of utility to them, and they're light finesse weapons, so they're very versatile in how you can use them. Now next is another dagger that's got an Act 1 with the Assassin's Touch. This one is a little silly because whenever you attack a target that's knocked out or sleeping, you get an additional 1d4 of necrotic damage. Now, you may use the spell Sleep in the game. It's not really that amazing, but it's an option. You can usually put 3 goblins to sleep early game. Doing it for this is not really worth it. However, another thing I want to mention is that it's applied on knocked out enemies. Now, you're likely not knocking out enemies unless you wanted them knocked out. You got to use the toggle non-lethal attacks here. So whenever they're knocked out, they're going to have 1 health point. Using this here doesn't really benefit us because even a single point of damage is going to kill them. So yeah, that is kind of weird. It works against sleeping targets. So it's a item if you get for saving Zaza. I think it's it's kind of meant to be a joke almost. It's not that great. I'm going to put it into the C tier just because it's a little bit hard to use. Yes, it gets extra damage, but it's just so niche and you're never going to be knocking enemies out to use it or sleeping them. So that's just something. Now, one of the better daggers that I want to talk about, especially once you get to Act 3, like this is where you get the dagger here, the Cold Snap. This is sold by Ferg in Rivington. This weapon is insanely bustedly strong, in my opinion, because the offhand chilling counter is what we're looking at here. So whenever a creature misses you with an attack, it must do a DC 13 con save or be chilled for 2 turns. Chilled, like it is in Divinity Original Sin 2, is extremely powerful because it makes the target take double cold damage. Why this is so powerful is that it actually doesn't have a save. So it says DC 13 con save. It's actually just automatically applied every single time that you use this weapon. It also has a really cool appearance to it. It's actually, when I made my Winter Spear Bard mod, I use this weapon for one of the weapons that you get in that mod. So not only is it a cool weapon in terms of the effects that it gives, but it's great for spellcasters. It also gives a +1 to your armor class when it's in the offhand. If you have the dual wielder feat, that's in +2 AC, so it's actually like you're using a shield, and the shield will apply a vulnerability to cold damage. If you got a team that's focused around cold, and honestly, very powerful teams, this is one of the best weapons to pair this with and have it on the offhand because you're going to go around and chill everybody. You can also chill enemies with the water elemental too, but yeah, the Cold Snap is actually kind of crazy. The fact that it can double one of the best damage types in the game without a save, it just puts this one in the S tier in my opinion. And if it did that without the +1 to the armor class, I would still think it's probably S tier because doubling a damage type that's really easy to do high damage rolls like Cone of Cold, Odaluk's Freezing Sphere, Wall of Ice, etc. It's just insanely good. And if you wanted to attack with it, you get additional cold damage, but that's not the fact that that's not what we're attacking with. It's just a really good weapon. And next we got a unique weapon that is extremely common with the Murderous Cut here. So This one you'll find all over Act 3 whenever you're fighting against the Ballast here. Basically, it'll deal an additional 1d4 piercing against targets with 50% of their health points or lower. So yeah, that's a nice passive ability. But honestly, at this point in the game, it's an Act 3 weapon. You're already going to have Cold Snap and many other weapons. You could even have the Knife of the Undermounted King in the main hand and offhand Cold Dagger. So yeah, just because it's so late in the game, this makes this weapon a lot worse in comparison. So I'd honestly just have to say it's a C tier weapon. Extra damage is always a good thing. You can get many of these, which is cool. It's a +1 weapon, but it's, in all honesty, not amazing compared to the others that we have, especially at this point in the game. Now, finally, we got a weapon we can cheese in our benefit. Now, we had a lot of weapons here that didn't really benefit us too much, but the Dread Iron Dagger. Now, this is a late game item, so that's a big caveat here, is you only get this if you're going to be an evil character. You can cheese it as well and get it on a good aligned playthrough, but you get this from the Ball Cultist. This weapon, when you're hidden, deals an additional 1d6 of necrotic damage. This is this weapon, but it's any weapon. Also, you can get this to be a little bit cheesy. So whenever you go to hide here, you can see our main hand dagger gets that additional 1d6 of necrotic damage. So that was applied to the Cold Snap. What's even crazier about this is if we get a situation where we can actually hide and then remove the dagger, so we can go ahead here, drop the dagger, we actually keep that 1d6 of benefit of necrotic damage. So yeah, you don't even have to have the dagger equipped to be able to get the effects from it. You just had to put it on, hide, and then pop it off. So yeah, you can cheese a little additional 1d6 of damage if you wanted to. It's not amazing and late game item, so I'm not going to throw it very high. I'm just going to probably put it at the top of the B tier because, yeah, you're likely not going to use it. But if you really wanted to get some necrotic damage, you can kind of do a little cheesy trick. There's another weapon similar to the Cold Snap here with the Gleamdance Dagger. So this one's cool because instead of being snowy, it's glowy. So yeah, you get that light around your character, which is great since it sets up so many different pieces of gear, including things like the Callous Glow Ring. So yeah, that 6-meter radius of light is actually kind of nice. It's a +2 weapon, so pretty useful in that regard. But it also gives a +1 bonus to armor class when you have it in the offhand. So similar to the Cold Snap, these two weapons, despite being available only in Act 3 in Rivington, are pretty good, honestly. The Gleamdance doesn't really do anything else special other than that +1 AC and the glow. So I mean, it can be good for setting up certain builds, but nothing to like write home about. So I will throw this roughly around the B tier here because I just think that it's, well, nice. It doesn't really do anything super special here, and there's other sources of light, especially in Act 3. Now, we also have the Ritual Dagger of Shar. I don't currently have it in the inventory here, but basically all it does is gives you an additional 1d4 of necrotic damage, which is not bad. However, one thing to note with that dagger is that you should have Shadowheart pick it up, or else you'll lose a little bit of approval. It's not amazing, so I'm just going to throw it into the B tier. Additional damage is nice, but not as good as some of the other weapons here. But we're getting into the good stuff here now. Next, we have Rhapsody, which actually had to be patched because it used to be actually kind of broken. What it used to do is you get a +1 to attack rolls, damage, and spell save DC for every foe you slay, up to a maximum +3. That's quite nice. Getting a +3 to spell save DC is great. The reason it used to be so busted is that you could attack crates and other inanimate objects and get this +3 really easily. It was actually until patch 6 that they updated it. So yeah, it's a little fun fact trivia. Also, the sweet bloodletting possibly inflicts bleeding when hitting a creature while hiding or invisible is quite nice. There's a few different builds that build up off of bleed, so you can get them like the Tiger Heart Barbarian, for example, can make it so that targets don't move once they get bleeded. So yeah, there's some synergy here for ability to actually use this on a particular like bleed setup. Honestly though, I do prefer some of the other daggers on this list, and even for a very rare weapon, the Knife of the Undermounted King from Act 1, which is a short sword. I do want to mention it briefly here because a lot of people think this is a dagger. It's a short sword that functions like one, but it's better than Rhapsody in my opinion. This is good for if you're focusing on like spell attacks, because it gives you a bonus to spell save DC, and the extra damage can be nice, but I don't think it's as good as some of the others on this list, and like honestly the Cold Snap is much better than it, so I might just put it around here. I think even the Dolor Amarus brings a bit more value. It's a bit better than a Sussur weapon, I would say, in most situations. But yeah, Dolor Amarus just getting the extra damage on crits, I think is a little bit better. There's somewhere around there, depending on your builds. But next we have one that's a little bit weird because it gets a unique appearance. This is one of the coolest looking daggers in the game, the Stillmaker here. So you can see what this looks like. It's got the ball skull on it. It's a green blade with that red going through it. You got little skull icons on it. It's a really cool weapon. However, this weapon is mid. It has a 1d4 of damage, which is great. +2 enhancement, cool. Hold person, level 3 spell. Now that is nice for someone that doesn't naturally get a hold save spell or a hold person spell. But the problem here is if you have someone that's, you know, not tuned towards spell casting, they're probably not going to have a high spell save DC to actually land this spell. So while it's nice and it's a it's like an upcast version, so you can actually target 2 people. if you're not spec'd into using it, you're likely not going to land this. So yeah, that's the only really big downside, is that people that are using a dagger are typically not going to be kind of using this to the most effective use of the weapon. I still think it's a good one, however, because Hold Person is one of the best spells in the game. Just be mindful you may want to have some other gear on your character if you plan to use that. The other big downside is it's only once per long rest. So yeah, it's cool and all, but I don't think it's really as amazing. I might even just, I might put a low A tier, high B tier, like, it's an okay weapon, and especially since you have to get it so late in the game, there's better options available. And the last weapon that we have here is the Blade of the First Blood, or Orin's Dagger, Bloodthirst, whatever you want to call it, depending on how you're getting it. There's actually there's a lot of weird things with this one. You can actually steal this from Orin before you end up taking her out, and it'll have a different name, and it'll have an additional 1d4 piercing damage on it. But the main thing here is it increases our critical hit chance, which is great. It stacks with everything else, plus 2 weapon enhancement. It comes with True Strike as a bonus action, which is nice. This should be how True Strike was in the full game, because no one wants to use an action on that. But also, when you have it in the main hand, it makes the target vulnerable to piercing damage. And what's great about that is that if you had the Boots of Stormy Clamor from Act 1, that also applies reverberation on your attack. So that Aura of Murder makes the target take double piercing damage, which is insane. Because, yeah, if you have the Dolor, as mentioned previously, Dolor Amarus, that 7 damage becomes 14 damage and scales all the way up. So you can basically one-shot anybody. The big benefit of using this weapon, though, is to have it in the offhand, though. This is when you get the true effects here, because it adds a +1 to your armor class, but you get the True Strike Riposte. This is what makes the weapon so absurdly good. When a creature misses you with an attack, you retaliate and gain True Strikes. You get advantage on their next attack, but it's weaponizing your reaction that's so good, because this is damage that you're normally if you don't have any way to use your reaction, you just skip damage every single turn. But if you have Riposte, you're likely getting attacked. If you have a high armor class, you're going to be dealing damage back to the enemy. So yeah, it's best to use Orin's 2 weapons, with the other one in the main hand and this in the offhand. And I honestly think that this is one of the best weapons in the game. Obviously, it's like the only legendary dagger. However, where does it stack compared to the Cold Snap? That's the question. This really depends on your team's composition, because with the Cold Snap, you're going to be using that weapon more so for the setting up your spellcasters aspect. So it's a great support utility weapon. Whereas if you're attacking with the Blade of First Blood, you're either trying to set up piercing or you're trying to get the True Strike Riposte, so it's more damage focused. So I do think this weapon, obviously, it's a legendary weapon. It's meant to be one of the best daggers in the game. It's obviously going to be the top of the S tier, but the Cold Snap gives it a good run for its money. Despite being an Act 3 spell, Cone of Cold, Odaluk, Sweet Freezing Sphere, Wall of Ice, they hit so much harder after this. So honestly, I in most situations, my team comp will benefit more from the Cold Snap, but I can't deny that the Blade of First Blood and Orin's Dagger is just a really good weapon too. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hit the subscribe button below if you enjoyed. I hope you guys all have an amazing day, and we'll catch you in the next one. Subscribe if you enjoyed.